indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Mr. Alt? Here. Mr. Beistel?
Here.
Mr. Carson?
Here.
Mr. Fry?
Here.
Mr. Polakowski?
Here.
Mr. Porter? Mrs. Rhodes? Mrs. Smith? Here. Mrs. Love?
Here.
Amelia Eckert? Jacob Lewandowski?
We did have executive session for personnel before our meeting this evening. Minutes approval.
Citizens' comments.
Oh, sorry, citizens' comments?
I have none.
It's not on my phone. Approval of minutes?
The board is asked to consider the approval of the minutes of the August 8th, 2019 discussion meeting and the minutes of the August 15th, 2019 voting meeting.
Motion? Mr. Carson, second. Mr. Beistel? Discussion? Roll call, please. Or voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Accounts, fund account, check summary.
The board is asked to consider the approval of the August 2019 fund accounting check summary.
Motion?
So be.
Second? Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
General fund expenditures and revenues report.
The board is asked to consider the approval of the August 2019 general fund expenditures and revenues report.
Motion? Mr. Fry, second. Mrs. Smith? Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson? Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Treasurer's report, July 2019.
The board is asked to consider the approval of the July 2019 treasurer report.
Motion?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Polakowski, second.
Second.
Mr. Carson, discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mrs. Smith? Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
General fund budget for new grant, PA Smart.
The board is asked to consider opening the 2019-2020 general fund budget per school code section 609, 24 PS 6-609, budgeted funds not to be used for other purposes or exceeded, to recognize and authorize the receipt and expenditure of the PA Smart Targeted Computer Science and STEM Education Grant, project number 153-18-023, for $35,000, and to approve the addition of the following special budgeted account numbers to be used for the grant. PA Smart Grant Account 10-7506-000-390, and will be entered to expenditure accounts to cover instructional staff development.
Motion? Second?
Second.
Sorry, discussion. Second.
Second.
Okay. Roll call?
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mrs. Smith? Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Board reports, student report?
That Friday, October 4th, we'll have the homecoming game at 7 p.m. And this is when Southmoreland will crown a homecoming king and queen.
SAT testing at Southmoreland High School on October 5th.
On Saturday, October 5th, is also the homecoming dance in the high school cafeteria from 6 to 9 p.m. And the dress is semi-formal. Tickets are at $5.
Friday, October 18th is the senior recognition night at 7 p.m.
Picture Makeup Day is October 25th.
SHS National Honor Society students will be cleaning up at the Scottdale Fall Festival.
And the Alpha students will be headed to Mount Pleasant for the Quiz Bowl on September 25th. That's all.
Superintendent report?
Well, I would like to welcome Amelia and Jacob to the board. It's always a pleasure to see young adults want to be active in their school and in their district. So I really commend you for your involvement, and I welcome you. So thank you very much for your involvement. A couple things. We are basically in our at the end of our first month of school. I do believe the school opening has gone well. I would like to recognize the fact, and a lot of times you hear about our students in schools, the problems. I really believe we have a great group of students in our buildings, and I really commend the students for how they've started the school year, and I hope that continues. I also commend the teachers and the staff for the wonderful jobs that they are doing so far. So with open school, things seem to be heading in a very good direction, and I am very pleased to report that. Our band has done exceedingly well. I think they've competed in a number of competitions. I'm sorry I don't have the exact competitions, but I do believe that they've taken first in several of those. Our sports teams are doing well. So once again, I commend everyone for the fine job that they're doing. An update on our fob system. Currently right now they are in the process of trying to finish that. So I will keep everyone informed of that situation. And I want to start educating the community. We keep hearing it in everything that we attend as far as superintendents and in our administrative groups. Vaping has become a major problem, not only in society, but mainly in schools. So that is something that we are going to be exploring and delving deeper into, and looking to present information not only to our students, but also to the community. There's no benefits in my estimation, but just the problems associated with the vaping epidemic. So we're going to start disseminating information and educating the community and students further on some of these issues. So, thank you.
Business manager report?
I have no special report this evening. Thank you.
Solicitors report?
Yes, I'm going to be passing out, with your permission, Mr. President. I had sought at a meeting today with with Mr. Masha and Mr. Marnell. We had been discussing an important issue that is time sensitive, and and felt that waiting another month would not be a good idea. And that is the possibility of obtaining a significant savings on one or two of our existing bond issues. The 2012, which has a principal amount of about $9,560,000 outstanding, and the 2013 with about $9,170,000 principal outstanding. That one has an approximate bump step of $88,000 in the 2022-2023 fiscal year. Our previous bond counsel, Clifford Pastel, has moved from Eckert Siemens Law Firm to the Dinsmore Scholl Law Firm, and you would need to authorize the release of our files to him so that he could continue to advise the district. This requires an initial designation as bond counsel, merely as a designation, but does not obligate you to ultimately hire him. And I'll have a little bit more to say about that later. The first resolution that's being handed out would authorize the Eckerd firm to transfer your files to him so that we'd have all the information available. Normally, in the past, a bond underwriter has come and addressed you and made a pitch, and then you've proceeded from that point on. Based upon our meeting, we want to give you more information up front and suggest a different pathway that may be more savings for you. The initial question is whether or not to hire a financial advisor before deciding on a method of financing and a method of obtaining a bond issuer. The pro side of this is that you can obtain their expertise, you can obtain their independent evaluation, and then have that person seek competitive bids from bond issuers rather than the method of just negotiating with them, which is more of a misnomer than a reality because of the difficulty of a school district attempting to negotiate something like that. The con side is that it will take some more time because you would want to send out requests for proposals and then choose someone. And then whether the fees of the financial advisor would be less than the savings they produce, which would be a concern, and we would have to try to build in some safeguard in regards to that. Another way of proceeding rather than doing a bond issuance is a bank loan. Mr. Pastel had talked with me at great length, and I obtained some information in order to prepare this discussion that I had with the superintendent and business manager and tonight. That's a possibility if the bond financing is not too long. Normally, banks would be interested in around 7 years. You might be able to get them interested up to 9 years. That would be, again, something that you could exceed advice from a financial advisor. If you do a bank loan, there's no bond issuing cost, and there's no need for bond insurance. There's no underwriter discount. You may have savings over a bond issuance. There's some things that just are, and I can't definitely classify them as pro or con. The interest rate for a bank loan is flat. It's the same throughout the loan. Whereas your interest rates for a bond issuance differ depending upon the time period it goes out, as they group different batches of bonds with different interest rates. That sometimes has significance for you in the way you want to plan your future, perhaps another refinancing. On the con side, it's always difficult to determine if the interest rate that a bank would offer you would be lower. You still have some filing fees with, I forget whether it's the Department of Education or the Department of State, and you would still be paying counsel, a bond-type counsel to advise you on the Local Government Unit Debt Act and matters relating to federal taxation. In addition to that, you might end up having to pay the bank's counsel. Some do that, some don't. It would be subject, there's some things that are common that relate to different federal requirements on conditions and restrictions to get a 10 million bank qualified lenders willing to, the 10 million bank qualified interest consideration. And that is lenders could be able to deduct their interest paid on funds that they borrowed to fund the loan to the district. However, there are certain limitations on that, and one of them is that, and it's specially defined for the loan not to exceed $10 million. In order to get around that, sometimes you can do 2 loans in close succession, but separated by at least 15 days, and still comply with all the legal requirements. One of the negatives with dealing with a bank loan is that banks are very slow to issue commitment letters. I don't know if any of you have had the experience, this used to happen more in the past with residential loans. Sometimes you wouldn't know that you're going to get the loan in writing until you're ready to do the closing. And that kind of creep situation could still exist with this kind of a loan. The bad part of that is if they end up denying it or putting some onerous condition on it, you've lost a lot of time. So that's another consideration there. So it might be legally difficult to do both the 2012 and 2013 borrowings, or it may be possible. And that is one of the other reasons to have a financial advisor involved. As a general rule, and it's hard to quantify, you should get better interest rates from a bond issuance rather than a bank loan. But there are certainly going to be exceptions about that. If you need to do two separate bond issues to meet those tests, then there would be more cost of issuance because you're doing two. There would be some scaling savings or reduction that could occur with the underwriters, with the bond issuance premium, and legal fees. But the process of getting to market with a bond issuance always involves drafting a preliminary and official statement. That takes about 6 to 8 weeks. Your business manager is normally involved with that as well as your solicitor. The bad part of it is because of all the reforms that have taken place, we're all now paying for the sins of all the people who did all the bad things in the past, and the underwriters and the insurers are taking more time to review things. All the more important to try to get started on this because it could well take to the end of the year plus a little bit more to accomplish. On the aspect of seeking competitive bids from bond underwriters, the district has never done this before. But all three of us, I believe, are in agreement that it is something that you should definitely consider. And part of our discomfiture, I mean, there's the general principle of trying to introduce some competition into this, but we had some real discomfiture with a recent article in the Wall Street Journal pointing out that some underwriters may be underpricing their offers and making more profit at the cost of the taxpayers of their municipal and school district clients. And consequently, the real total interest that you're paying maybe end up being more than it should have been. It's very difficult to figure that out and calculate it. And the only way it can be done is by looking at a tremendous amount of transactions after yours is already closed and seeing what's going on and who's buying and selling. Obtaining that kind of information is not readily available. The Wall Street Journal did an extensive investigative piece on this in which they attempted it, and they were able to quantify situations where underwriters would sell the bonds and within days buy some back and then resell them again, making a profit again. Now, they are not in the same situation as a fiduciary. You're dealing with them as a buyer of the bonds. But on the other hand, you would like to think that if there are savings to be made, that you'd have a chance at it. So what you have in front of you tonight are two different resolutions. One would be to allow Mr. Pastel to be initially further involved and have access to all the information that he would need. The second resolution is titled A Resolution for Obtaining Financial Advisor for Possible Bond Refinancing, and it authorizes the preparation of a request for proposals from financial advisors who, if hired by the board, and they would still have to be hired by you, and you might decide you didn't want to do it, would advise on which bonds to refinance, the 2012s, the 2013s, potentially both, and to seek competitive bids. In the initial aspect of this, in which Mr. Marnell and I think Mr. Masha maybe had received solicitations from bond underwriters, they were picking one and not even bringing up the other one, which kind of piqued Jim's interest and then mine as to, well, why only talk about one? So we're trying to give you more options to pursue this and to obtain more competition and hopefully a better process if you want to go that route. And I think we were unanimous that we all think you should consider doing this as a method of a better way of doing business.
I have a question for you, Mr. Marnell, and you brought it up, but before we do any of this, since you have brought this subject up, and you must have some idea of what average and general numbers are, what is a very preliminary estimate of how much we would save by refinancing these bonds versus getting the advisor, paying the lending agency its fee, and hiring an advisor? You know, those three things added up. I mean, what are we talking about? If you're saving $1 million and it's costing you $800,000, I'm just throwing numbers out. You must have some idea of if it's going to be of a benefit that's going to be worthwhile.
In other words, who initiated looking into refinancing?
We all were being recipients of these solicitations from different bond underwriters. And so I said, we need a meeting to discuss this. And we had a meeting. And in the process of getting ready for the meeting, Mr. Marnell became aware of this Wall Street Journal article. I had a conversation with Mr. Pastel, who gave me the same article, which we all talked about in part of that meeting, as to, well, how comfortable do we feel about continuing to just go along with the method of choosing an underwriter, and whatever they do, that's what they do. And we still feel real comfortable with that anymore.
I can go along with that, but you know, anytime you deal with money, the critical element with money is time.
Yes.
So if you're going to go through all that process, you're adding more and more time. The markets are volatile, but that's the chance you take. That's the risk you put out there. So if these different firms initiated talking to you about refinancing, I know they've thrown numbers out. So
I didn't get a chance to answer the question.
I'm so sorry.
And I'm doing this partially from memory. I am doing it from memory. And I don't know if you guys have a better memory, but there was one figure of $300,000.
For both issues or one?
One issue.
What?
2012,
One issue,
That's what we would save?
theoretically.
theoretically.
Okay,
Now, I don't know that that takes into account all of the questions that you've asked. I don't think they've done that. I think they've just given you, I think they just gave us the
Difference between interest
difference
rates.
between the interest rates, yes.
What I'd like to know then, just using the $300,000 as an average, how much are we going to spend for that advisor, if we decide, on average? And I'm sure that's out there in the public domain. How much they charge us to refinance from the lending, and how much your fee would be?
I don't know what they would charge. That's part of the problem, and that would be one of the
Ballpark
reasons.
figure.
I don't know. I've never dealt with them before. I don't know if Jim has. I don't have
Don't
a
you think
number.
we ought to look into how much an advisor charges on average? I mean, I think that should be some kind of knowledge that we should have.
That's what the RFP would
That's
disclose.
what the purpose of the RFP, to make them come forward with different people making proposals, and you could then decide whether you like, you know, this firm or that firm, or this rate or that rate. At this point, we don't know what they would do.
Yeah, but we're going to do all this, and we may be just jumping through hoops.
That's possible.
That's
But,
why I'm
but
asking.
that's fine, Ken, because if there's a possibility to save a couple $100,000,
Sure, it's worth it.
you got to do it. My concern is timing, the time element of money. The markets are so volatile, the interest rates change precipitously. A Gulf War would change everything.
And that's always been the case, and it's the case again now, and we recognize that, and I recognize it, and the timing is a factor, and it seems like the timing factor is always being used against us rather than for us, and we're trying to find a way around that. The best we can do is to offer you a chance tonight, if you want to pursue it, of authorizing putting out requests for proposals, which I would then anticipate bringing back for you to pick someone next month. I don't know that we could do it faster than that, but that would require an extra meeting.
All right.
I remember in the past that this board, whenever we refinance bonds, we had issues with the fees. And like Bill and Dave said, they sort of put you between a rock and a hard place. You have to make a decision shortly. And I know Ken threw a number out, would you say $800,000, and you only make 200?
Yeah.
I mean, there's money to be made, but that fee is also substantial. So do you want to give the bond company business and pay their fee and save, I don't know, $500,000? Or do you not want to pay their fee and don't save $500,000? It's, you know what I mean? So I think we should look around.
Our bond issue matures in 2028, so you're talking only 8 years. So the savings is not going to be huge, because we're only talking about 8 years left on this bond issue.
Correct.
They mature in 2028.
Yeah, I had no idea. I was just throwing that out there. I just remember it was like,
when you brought that up, I remember all these numbers.
Would that reflect the fact
Yeah,
that
your
we
last
probably
payment
won't get a lot
is April of
savings?
2029.
Would that reflect as a short term,
On the 13
that we
issue.
will not get a lot in savings?
Well,
Since
you
we don't
want,
have that much money
the
to
shorter the
refinance.
term, the less money you'll save.
So,
8 years.
yeah, so we should really be paying attention to how much all the fees are gonna cost.
Exactly.
Versus how much we're gonna,
Exactly.
So I think we should look to see, what other bond companies have to offer. One can be cheaper than, obviously would do that.
But you add time to the process,
Yes.
and interest rates could move.
I'd rather spend the time than wind up getting stiffed in the end.
Yeah, well, that's what's going to make your decision. Do you want to spend the extra time to get more input, or do it fast? That's
You're
your
really not
choice.
guaranteed anything, right, except
Nothing.
spending money.
No.
Yeah, which is right, except spending money.
You're not guaranteed anything. All you're guaranteed, you're gonna spend money to find out whether it's
Well,
right or
well,
wrong.
the money you're going to spend will be for Mr. Patonic, because Mr. Marnell's on payroll, and so is Mr. Mashin. Their time doesn't count.
Your costs are settled at bond settlement, so if you don't sell bonds, the bond underwriter makes no fee. Bond counsel makes no fee. The paying agent makes no fee. The verification agent makes no fee. So if you don't do a deal, there's no fees. If you use an independent financial advisor, you may or may not be able to negotiate how much of a fee you would end up paying them to help you through the process to get to that point where you either do a bond issue or not. But so Bill knows, all your fees are paid at bond closing.
Right.
You don't do a bond issue, you don't have any closing costs.
But the initial step would be just Mr. Patonic's cost, getting it.
My time and his time.
But we're going to pay you no matter what.
My past practice has been, although I don't know that it's ever happened, that you got to the end and then pulled the rug. But it was always with the understanding that if you don't do the deal, then I don't bill for the extra work involved on my end. Now, I don't know what Mr. Pastel would do.
Oh, so you'll just have a flat rate if the deal goes through? Is that what you're
So that's
saying?
the way I would do it.
What was
All
your
right.
fee last time we did this?
2,000.
I thought it was more like
No, no,
7,500.
no, no.
No, it wasn't that.
No, it was a combination.
There was two bond issues, and
There
that
was two
became
bond
the
issues.
controversy.
Mr. Pastel charged $15,000 plus costs, at the advertising costs he was reimbursed for, and my fee was $7,400, I think. You're not going to have that size this time. It's going to be smaller.
It was two bond issues, right, David?
Yeah. The other thing is, it will make a difference if you just do the one bond issue and that's it. If you do one bond issue, and that's why I kept bringing up that 15 days, you have to wait 15 days, and then you can do another bond issue and still not run afoul of that 10 million cap.
So has anyone thrown numbers out for both bond issues?
No,
And why?
we don't know.
The fellows at Piper Jaffray felt that there was no savings to be accrued refinancing the 2013, that the savings are in the 2012 issue.
Okay.
They didn't prove it other than
But here's
that's their
another
opinion.
problem for you. It's the 2013 issue that has the bump increase in it.
The 2013 issue had the what?
The bump increase. You're not level funded. In 2022, 2023, it goes up by $88,100.
You mean the interest rates?
The total payment
Total
due out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the interest rates are going up as the longer.
No, it was done that way. It was planned that way.
So they'll get more interest, and so that's why they don't want to refinance that one?
No, I'm sorry. We don't know why. Well, I mean, that...
But that would be a
they've
good reason why.
They've given Jim that as a reason. From your perspective, you are facing the possibility that if you don't do anything, let's say you don't decide not to do anything, then come 2022, 2023, what you had been paying for your bond payments will increase by $88,100, which is, you know, in the area of $1 million. So that's another expenditure that you have in the future. So if you...
So that's bond principal.
If you do...
You're paying more.
All I can say, annual change in debt service payments, increase, $88,100.
That's because you're paying more bonds than originally.
Yes.
It has to be.
It doesn't matter what it's for, it's there.
Right. Right, it's going to be an expense.
Right.
And that's what yours,
But then it stays at that higher level,
Right, and that's what you're,
2022, 2023.
3 budgets from now.
so you have 5 years left to pay. Which I can understand why that would happen, because districts do that to save money right now, currently.
Yes.
Especially with the pension situation school districts are going through. So that all makes sense, but I'm fine.
And you made good points. Everything has been theoretical for the last couple of months. Things are changing. And some sectors of the economy are already starting to experience a recession. You got the very volatile situation in the Middle East. So gasoline prices have already gone up. So this whole thing could blow up. The markets are so unstable that the theoretical savings could evaporate because of changing conditions. And it would be all for naught, other than, the time that it has been expended, looking at this, studying this. And those net savings, theoretical savings that they quoted us, Piper Jaffray, R&B Capital, and I forget who else, they were done at different times. They were theoretical, and those were net savings. In other words, they estimate all the costs that go into doing the bond issue. It's not gross savings, and then you have all your costs. Those are net savings. So,
Okay.
yes, those are net savings.
And the feds did cut the
And they're net
federal rate.
savings because they have to also net out the the change in state subsidy, your
Yes.
plan con payments, because the state shares in the savings.
Yes. And the feds did cut the Fed rate, and sad to say, a recession would help us as far as interest rates are concerned.
Maybe, maybe not. You know, the bond market rates are not tied directly to Federal Reserve prime rates. That's a short-term rate.
Not directly, yeah.
So, you know, bond markets are based on risk, market volatility. You know, we don't have the expertise to monitor bond markets
No.
and forecast the future of that.
Well, the sooner we move on it, the better.
These people, Dave, that are on this resolution, is Eckert Siemens and this Pastel. How did we arrive at these folks?
I think Eckert Siemens was our bond counsel before I became solicitor. Early in my solicitorship, Mr. Pastel joined that firm. So he's had extremely long experience with with the Eckert Siemens firm and with us. A few years ago, he left that firm and went to another firm, Dinsmore Scholl, S-H-O-H-L. I believe that Mr. Porter had experience in the past with Mr. Pastel.
Many times.
And of course I have, because he's been here for almost the duration of my service. And he has always made himself available and been willing to provide us with advice and time without charging for it, you know, and with no guarantee that they were going to get the bond work. As I mentioned, he recently, I had a lot of questions I was asking him, and then the three of us gone on the phone with him also. So my respect is for him, not for the Eckert Siemens firm on this particular issue. Because of that, and he's a well-respected bond counsel and is been doing it for a long time. So
After we did the refinancing in 2014, subsequent to that, Cliff Pastel left Eckert Siemens and went to Dinsmore. So the official files that Mr. Pastel had working with us are still at his old firm. So, and that's where they belong, because they were the bond counsel. We want to stay with Mr. Pastel because he has actually done the work for us. So, but we need your permission to direct Eckert Siemens to hey, move the files to Dinsmore Scholl.
Jim, who was the underwriter for 14 refinance?
Well, it's been Piper Jaffray for the 14 issue, the 2013 issue, the 2012 issue, and maybe even going back to, well, I know the 2008 issue. I don't know how far back they did bond work for you.
Who's the rep? Who's the rep? I can't remember names.
The two fellas, Randy Frederick and Chris Shelby.
Okay, I know those names. Okay.
One of the reps died back in 2014, Thomas Kinney. Passed away, I guess died is not a good term. Tom passed away from cancer.
well, that's all I have to report. So. If somebody wants
We need to vote on this tonight.
Well, I'm giving you information, I'm giving you a pathway, and I'm suggesting that that's
Let's
what
roll.
you do. I'm recommending it, but, you know, I don't want to be out of turn with it, so whenever it comes up in the, whenever you want to do it is up to the president.
It would be a walk-on item, and then you'd have to open up for citizens' comments before you officially moved on it.
It's up to the president. You want to do it now, or you want to do it later? You want to do it now? Or these- All right.
It's all fresh.
Be it resolved that Southmoreland School Board authorizes the president to sign and either the superintendent or business manager to send an authorization directing the law firm of Eckert Seaman to release and transfer any and all of Southmoreland School District's physical and electronic files in their firm's possession to Clifford Pastel of Dinsmore and Shoal LLP, 6 PPG Place, Suite 1300, Pittsburgh, PA 15222, whom Southmoreland hereby designates as its bond counsel, and send it to Clifford Pastel at Dinsmore, Shoal, and David Federline at Federline@eckerdseaman.com.
I'll make that motion.
Any public comment?
Any public comment? Hearing none. Roll call. Any discussion?
Sorry.
We
That
already
was
got a second.
discussion.
Roll call.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson? Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries, 9 unanimous.
Are we moving on to the second one? Yes. Madam President, do we have?
Yes.
Okay, resolution for obtaining financial advisor for possible bond refinancing. Whereas Southmoreland School Board desires to pursue the possibility of refinancing existing bond issuance of 2013 and/or 2012 if it can realize significant savings. Whereas the school board desires to exercise due diligence in considering seeking proposals for the engagement of a financial advisor, hereby known as FA, to provide services for a possible refinancing, including the seeking of competitive bids from underwriters rather than relying on negotiating the price with a selected underwriter. Be it resolved that the solicitor shall prepare in consultation with the superintendent and business manager a request for proposal from financial advisors who, if selected, would be contracted to: number one, advise on the advantages and disadvantages of refinancing only the 2013 bond issue or only the 2012 bond issue and/or both the 2013 and the 2012 bond issue, either together or independently, as may be advised by the financial advisor, and determine if they should be separated by 15 days if financially desirable to qualify for the $10 million limit on bond issue to qualify for bank qualified interest. And number two, advise, prepare, and implement, if authorized by the board, seeking competitive bids by underwriters of bond issue for refinancing said bond issue or issues on proposals from banks for bank loan as a refinancing method. Number three, such additional services as may be necessary or desirable to protect the financial interest of the school district. B, the secretary is authorized and directed to obtain advertisement of a legal notice prepared by the solicitor at least once in the Daily Courier and at least once in the Greensburg Tribune Review, Pittsburgh edition, and the treasurer is authorized and directed to pay therefor. C, the request for proposals shall also be specifically sent to Public Financial Management, Susquehanna Advisors, Financial Solutions, and Concord Advisors.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Mrs. Smith had the motion first. Would you like to second?
Yeah,
Okay.
is there a question?
She just made the motion first. You didn't hear.
Second.
Okay. Public comment? You don't need to run. Is there a time limit?
Can I ask something while they're coming up? These four firms specifically, why these four specifically?
We were trying to get some assurance of getting to people who do this business. No matter how many times you advertise in the Daily Courier, there's no guarantee that everybody's going to see it. No disrespect to them, but it's a small local paper. Mr. Marnell had previous experience with one of these companies, and
Public financial management.
Yeah.
Mr. Marnell had previous experience with the other three. So we've,
Cliff did.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pastel did, not Mr. Marnell. So that was our starting point. That's really it, because I haven't had an experience with any of them.
How about some of our old underwriters that are still?
These aren't underwriters, these are financial advisors. We've never
Oh,
done this
okay,
before.
I'm sorry.
There's a firewall now between
The
an
idea is to have
underwriter
an independent
and the
advisor.
FAs.
Okay,
Due to Dodd-Frank regulations,
Yeah.
SE, it's changed, the environment has changed because of some of the issues and problems that have happened in that industry.
okay.
But Mr. Pastel has had experience with all of these FAs. I specifically have with Public Financial Management because we used them as our FA back in 1999 to do a competitive bond sale for us
Okay.
up at Ligonier Valley.
Hi, Jan Kiefer, 628 Homestead Avenue. I'd like to try to word this so the students can understand what's going on here. 9 years ago, I was standing here, and Occupy Wall Street was it was functioning back then, and the board didn't want to hear me and ran me out of here and had me arrested because I objected to this very scenario that we're going to be sitting here tonight. We are deeply in debt in this school district. Our community people are in debt. You know, a third of the people in our community probably could, and I've seen statistics, I'm just going to say, a third of the people in our community probably couldn't come up with $1,000 in the next 3 months if they needed it in an emergency. You know, our country's deeply in debt. When we got into this debt, correct me if I'm wrong, it was to build these buildings. Is that right, Bill?
Yes.
Okay, so 6, 8, 10 years ago, they decided we're going to bite the bullet, we're going to go deeply in debt and build these buildings, which is fine with me. We couldn't keep in the slums in the schools that we were in. But the problem here is what we're seeing here tonight. All this money from you, your parents, me, my children and my parents is getting sucked out of the community with Mr. Pascal. How much has he made on this school district? 50, 100,000, 200,000? No one knows. How much have we paid Wall Street to give America schools? We shouldn't have to pay people on Wall Street so these CEOs can offshore this money and take it away from us. So we're paying twice for our school basically because of this ridiculous system that we're forced into, and we just can't keep coming up with the same conversations for generations after generations. And when the radicals and revolutionaries say this is wrong, we're poor not because we're a poor country, we're poor because all the money's getting sucked to Wall Street. And that's what's happened here tonight. We've paid a lot of money for this school building, far over what it should have cost us. Thanks.
Catherine Fike. I just picked up this agenda off the table. Do you know that everything you just discussed is not on this agenda? This is the public's agenda that you laid out here. You did not list a solicitor's report or any discussion about refinancing on this agenda. That's not legal. Mr. Petonic, is that legal?
Yes, I asked for permission to amend the agenda.
No,
before
she
the
said
meeting.
we'll have the solicitor's report.
Yes.
She said we'll have this. There's no solicitor's report on this agenda. It's not on this agenda. There's no way for the public to know that you were going to discuss this according to this agenda. You did not ask. She said we will have the solicitor's report. It says number 1, student report. There is no number 2. Number 3 says business manager report. There is no number 4. And number 5 says the WIU report. Everything you just discussed is not on this agenda. This is at least the third time that I have watched this refinancing stuff go through. I watched when Mr. Alt brought in here absolute concrete evidence that Mount Pleasant was doing the same thing with the same amount of money at half the cost. Do you remember that, Ken? At half the cost. And you people would not change anything you were doing. You just keep giving this money to this man time after time after. He's walked away a multimillionaire. Another word for free is a bill, a fee. A fee is a bill. You're giving him a fee as a bill. I maintain that everything you discussed tonight is illegal. It is not on this agenda. This is the agenda. You're not on it.
Christy Smith, 818 Parker Avenue. I don't know if you could answer questions. I'm trying to understand what exactly is going on in layman's terms. So we owe a lot of money. Can someone tell me how much we owe total?
What was the question again?
How much do we owe total, in total?
Okay, as of, we're going to be making our next payment October 1st. So let's go back to as of June 30th, our total principal outstanding was $23,220,000. Now, the payment that we're going to be making on October 1st, very shortly, is all interest payments, no principal payments. So the payment we'll be making on October 1st, very shortly, is $333,042.50. That's the interest on the three remaining bonds that are outstanding.
But that won't decrease the amount that we owe.
Well, you decrease the
'Cause it's
amount
just
you owe
interest.
when you make principal payments. Our principal payments are scheduled on April 20th.
So the October payment doesn't decrease the 23 million?
No,
'Cause it's
the April payments
interest.
will, just like the April
Right.
payments in
That's what I just said.
2019 did.
Okay, so the $330,000 that we're going to pay in October does not decrease at all the 23 million that we owe.
No, it's interest expense on the bonds outstanding.
Right, so it doesn't decrease that.
Well, bond payments are not like your mortgage payment that are made monthly. You're making principal and interest every month on your mortgage, on your car loans. Semi-annual debt service payments are very different than
So in October,
residential
then how
loans.
much will we owe?
I'm sorry, say again?
So then in October, how much will we owe?
Well, again, the amount owed in October, principal outstanding, will be the same.
what
Because
I
we're
just-
only making
right.
interest payments.
Right, that's what I just said. It would be the same. The total amount that
Well,
we owe
principal
after our
outstanding will
payment.
still be the same, yes.
Right. That's what I'm just saying. It's just very unclear. I feel like circles are being talked around things, and I think for the people that are in the audience and maybe the people that are watching this later, this is how it should have been led so that people understand a little bit better. Because I actually have some knowledge of finance, and I had no idea what you guys were talking about. I didn't know if you were talking about investments, if you were talking about money we owed. It was all very, very unclear. So we owe $23 million that's cut into two different loans, basically? Three different loans. Okay. So you're only looking to refinance one of them, possibly?
Yes.
Well, it could be two.
It's possible that you could refinance two of them. If it's, the savings are there, the net savings have to be
Right.
there. And the general rule of thumb in the industry, Bill will know this, is 2%. So you have to achieve at least a 2% net savings, that's net after your cost, to make it worthwhile to do. It's similar to refinancing your home mortgage. Your objective there is to decrease your payments, and usually your payments are less interest because you refinance for a lower interest rate because rates have gone down. It's basically the same principle with refinancing bonds. You're not adding new money, so you're not.
Are you extending
I think Jan
the
was afraid
term?
we were adding new money to borrow. No, we're not increasing to borrow new money. Now,
You're not extending the term? Nothing like that?
No, you would want to match the
Yeah,
same
it's
term.
illegal.
Okay.
You want to match the same
So
term.
this
you
Mr.
got.
Pastel, is that what you said? Pastel? So he used to be in charge of these? He
No.
left the firm
No.
that was,
He was special counsel.
There's
There's
special counsel.
bond counsel. It's a special specialty, that lawyers can attract to,
Specialize
much
in.
like your doctor
Yes.
could track to a specialty like, neurosurgery.
So
or-
he's just a lawyer? He doesn't have anything
He's
to
a
do with
very
his finance?
special lawyer, bond counsel.
Does he work for a finance company or a brokerage company, anything like that?
He works for a law firm.
Okay, so we're going for what he recommends?
No.
No.
No, the financial advisors that he recommends. You said he recommended 3 of them and you recommended one of them, or knew one
We
of
asked him
them?
his experience with using the experience with what's known as independent municipal financial advisory firms.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned these 4 that he's, just off the top of his head, that he's very knowledgeable of, that he's seen their work involved in these projects. So,
And no one local?
All 4 of them are active in Pennsylvania.
they're
But no
pen-
one local here?
it's
No
not-
one local here?
There is nobody local,
There's no financial advisors local?
not for this kind of work.
Not this kind of work, no.
This isn't like to help you
It's not personal.
where to invest
Oh, I
your
understand.
personal monies.
I understand.
This is dealing with special
These firms are headquartered in your major cities like
I
Pittsburgh,
understand. Yes.
Philadelphia,
refinancing issue.
Washington.
Right. So we're not looking at financing with a bank who's a fiduciary?
No, I left that option open.
Okay, so we are looking at
resolution
that.
included banks.
See, your
Okay.
bond's outstanding, your 2012 issue outstanding, as Mr. Petonic mentioned, the principal outstanding on them is $9,560,000. Now, the way this current schedule runs out, the last payment on that bond issue will be in April of 2027. So that's a short enough time period that a bank may want to bid on doing a traditional bank loan.
And the financial advisor will tell you
That's
which he thinks.
2012.
So 13 is 14 million?
The 2013 issue outstanding right now is $9,170,000, less than the 2012 issue. But its run out is the last year, 28, 29. Its last payment is April of 2029. And that was the original run out of the bond issue that you folks did in 2005.
That's right.
When you borrowed the money. The $24,165,000 was borrowed for financing these projects.
Right.
And that was the last payment. These issues that are sitting here now are from refinancing older bond issues. For example, when you did the bond issue back in October 1st of 2005, I made a copy of the official statement. As of June 30th of 2005, I'm sorry, that would have been when this bond issue was issued, not June 30th, October 1st of 2005. The bonds that were outstanding were the new issue of 2005, $24,165,000. You had a series from 1998 that was outstanding, $9,745,000. You had a series from 1997 of $6,135,000, and a series from 1996, $565,000. So, as of the issuance of the 2005 bonds, you had $40,610,000 then of outstanding bonds. So what has happened over time, before my time, there have been refinancings that have taken place. There was an issue in 2008 that was done, and then there was an issue done in 2012, again before my time. 2013 was a refinancing, and I think that was a chunk of those 2005 bonds, perhaps. 2014 was my first year here. We did that refinancing in April 29th of 2014. That paid off a 2008 A issue. 2008 had 2 issues to it. And then in 2014, we had the bond issue was split into 2 pieces. The A piece paid off what was left of the 2008 A issue, and the B issue of 2014 paid off of what was refinanced, a major portion of the 2005 bond issue. So none of these issues involved new money except in 2000, 14, there was a small new money piece because of the situation we had with our field, the stadium, because of the flood. We had that flood at the end of August of 2013. And you might recall during the fall and winter months heading into the spring, needing a small part of new money to put into that field. So while you were doing that refinancing anyway, a small piece, I think $80,000, I'd have to pull out the official statement, money was added to complete additional work at that field. I hope that helps.
I think the 2014s aren't callable, right?
Well, there's 5-year calls, so they may be eligible for call. But let me tell you something. The 14A issue, its last payment was 2 years ago, October of 2017. So the A issue is now done. This was done. And what's left is the 2014B issue, and its last payment is April of 2022. So it's of such short duration that it wouldn't pay to involve that, I think, in the refinancing of all these bonds. May or may not. That's, I think, why we need the specialization of a municipal financial advisor who structures these and helps their clients.
2005 was 23 million, okay? That was
24,165,000.
Right, that was for middle school.
That was to renovate Scottsdale Elementary School and to build the new middle school.
Right, and Albert was supposed to be included, but due to time, we lost that opportunity. The bond issues before that, what, 96, 97? Is that? I can't remember the years anymore. But that was for the high school.
Well, probably
what was the balance left on the high school at that point? I can't remember.
I really couldn't tell you. I don't know which bond issue pertained to the high school. What I did was I opened up the official statement for the 2005 issue, and I copied the front page of the official statement, and then I copied page A11, A-11, which was the schedule of bond indebtedness. So that was adding the new piece, the 2005, and also the old pieces that were still outstanding. The 1998 was a refunding series. I don't know what it. Yes. That was at the time of these new bond issues were issued in 2005. There was 9,745,000 outstanding of the 98 refunding series. The series of 97 and 96 are probably portions of the issues that you did for the high school.
The original for the high school.
That sounds logical to me.
So the bottom line is we owe a whole lot of money, and we continue to pay a whole lot of money to refinance this. But the bigger question right now is why your report is omitted from this agenda again. Why we can go number 1, number 3, number 5. So, Mr. Masha, your report wasn't even listed on this agenda that I have. I mean, I'm sure it's listed on you all's agenda, but it is literally not listed on our agenda. I'm going to assume that you all had this meeting and discussed things way prior to this meeting. Don't shake your head, because he read from a piece of paper over there of what the resolution or whatever was going to be. So this was all done, okay, but it was done prior to me picking up this paper at 7:05.
I was still working on it at 4:30 this afternoon.
But you were not working on it at 7:05.
I had to leave my office to come here.
Well, your report should be on this piece of paper. If we're going to vote on things and we're going to present them for over an hour at a meeting,
I have tried to
it should
avoid
be
that.
on here.
I have tried to avoid that.
Okay, so,
And the
again,
problem
is it legal?
to wait another month and run more risk of losing time?
Is it legal?
Or
Is it legal to not be listed on this piece of paper? I understand all your reasonings. We just listened to it for well over an hour. My question is it legal if it is not on our paper? Is it legal?
I believe it is, because the public still was given an opportunity to speak to it.
not to prepare anything, and all that mumbo jumbo that you just presented to us, we should have been able to pull that up and read what was going on prior to this meeting as it is posted online.
That would have meant not doing it tonight and waiting another month.
That would have meant starting a day earlier, Dave. So you have done at 4 o'clock yesterday.
We started our meeting at 9 o'clock
Well, then
this
start
morning.
that one at 9 o'clock the day before we
And,
started.
you know, it's a perfect world out there. I'm telling you what actually happened. We decided that it was not a good idea to wait another month.
Put it on the agenda.
The agenda had already gone out 2 days ago in public. That's the other problem.
I think that's a problem with this board docs system. I like the old system of office-prepared agendas, and they come fresh to the meeting. That's just my personal opinion.
The bottom line, Dave, Mr. Patonic, is I don't care what you discuss tonight. I want to know why it was omitted from this agenda. That's what I want to know. Why is there no solicitor report even on this agenda? Who approves it? Who approves it? That's the bigger question here. I don't care what you had to talk about. You could have talked about anything tonight. But the bottom line is you're not even listed on the agenda. That's the part that we're all missing here.
I don't have your version. Does it not say solicitor information?
No, because it's locked.
See, and ours does.
See, mine does.
And I think that's the problem, is we're looking at a version not only online that shows this, but also I printed one out this afternoon that has those missing pieces on it, so.
Someone needs to explain that to us.
My office, off the website, off our website, there's a thing called Board Docs, Admin. Well, that was a copied version that you picked up. I don't know when that was.
No, it's right on here.
Oh. Well, you know what, that's a good, you know what, that's what we need to look at. What is the public side look like versus our administrative side?
Different than yours. I just passed it to you.
Yeah.
What
Can I
you
see it?
got, that's what it is.
You're not allowed to see it.
I believe so, yeah.
This isn't the first time either.
I don't know why this is happening. I don't know.
It's happening because the solicitor and the superintendent's reports are locked.
Why are they locked?
Because some of it is confidential. So you need a way to always show solicitor's report with those words. I don't know how you do it. but
Well, you
that's
know
part
what?
of the Electronic or the software program.
I just clicked on Board Docs Public. And I'm looking at it right now online. It has number 1, students, number 2, superintendent, number 3, business manager, number 4, solicitor.
You're wrong.
Well, no, I opened up a new window and then I went to our website and I clicked on Board Docs Public. I have on my other window here, Board Docs Administrative. But
Why is this happening?
I can't answer why this is happening. We don't do the Board Docs process. So I think that's what we need to resolve is why the systems are not in sync. I don't think it's due to anybody's
We need to look at another system.
nefarious need to keep things.
Yeah, I was not aware that you didn't see that. Because it shows on ours.
I'll tell you what I'll do. Next time we have a meeting, when I go to print out my copy, because I like having a paper copy, I'll print out a bunch and I'll put it there. That way you're seeing what's on here. The only thing you won't see is the stuff that's listed additional information, because I print that out separately too. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is an online computerized system, and there's different steps involved that Mr. Masha and Mrs.
yeah.
Tarzan go through, and, you know,
She got the first and second.
What?
We got a first and a second.
We got first and second.
well, I wish I did that piece of paper. I didn't, but.
Okay, 'cause we're ready to go. Is she gonna go nurse? Like, you in a minute. If we
Are
vote.
we moving on?
Yes.
Okay, roll call?
Scratch it all, wait till.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel? Mr. Carson?
No.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mrs. Love, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Motion carries 8 and 1 no.
WIU report? CWCTC report?
Yes, I want to thank Mr. Master for coming to our JOC meeting last night. For consideration of time, I just have a couple of things. Our new IT company, Gray Signal, continues to make upgrades and repairs to the network infrastructure. I know I talked about it last month that we're out with Cloudcast and we had some problems, so we hired a new one. Their name is Gray Signal. Also, with the recommendation of our business manager, we approved the use of Pliget and the use of procurement cards. I know here we use Pliget, right, Jim?
We use Pliget, but we're not using their procurement card.
Okay.
That's something I've been to look into. So let me know what their success is with it, and maybe we'll implement it here.
Okay. I know Mary Ann said there's, with Pliget, that's more work for her, but it saves the district money, and not the district, the CWCT.
Well,
Yeah.
and indirectly, then it saves all the districts involved in there because, costs are less, and eventually that affects your budget and how much you know are charged in tuition. So
Yes.
I think they have a rebate program, and I think that's at least it's been years since I've entertained a presentation on their procurement card. Similar to a credit. Well, it is a credit card, but it works differently than your normal consumer credit card.
Yes. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. PSBA liaison report?
Pennsylvania charter school students and their families were at the state capitol on Monday protesting Governor Wolf's proposal to impose new rules on charter schools. Charter schools enroll more than 140,000 students and control $1.8 billion in taxpayer money. In July, Wolf announced a series of executive actions imposing new fees and ethic requirements on charter schools. Public school districts would also be authorized to limit enrollment to low-performing charters. The proposed regulations would be the first substantive reforms to the charter school sector since 1997. Charter school advocates say the new regulations would harm those wanting alternatives to traditional public schools. A report released Monday found cyber school revenues in Pennsylvania are rising faster than enrollment and spending on education. Education Voters of Pennsylvania, which is a public school advocacy group, found that public school districts sent a combined $519 million to cyber charter schools during the 2017-2018 school year, and that's a 12% increase from the previous year. The group's report concluded that the cost can't be explained by rising enrollment alone and alleged that cyber charter schools receive far more money than they spend to educate children. The report also found that cyber models operated by public schools cost an average of $5,000 per year. That's about half of what cyber charter schools spent to educate a student. The group called on lawmakers to work with Wolf to ensure cyber charter tuition rates match the actual cost of educating students and not the cost of advertising and rising executive salaries. That concludes my report.
Anti-bullying committee?
Thought that we would wait until everybody kind of got back in school and got in rhythm. We'd like to plan a meeting maybe for beginning of October, try to get together and get a report on how things are going this year and maybe what we can do moving forward.
Thank you. School safety committee report?
No report this time.
Okay, thank you. No old business, moving on to new business, solicitors workshop.
The board is asked to consider the approval of the annual school law workshop for David Petonic, school solicitor in Hershey, PA. School law workshop registration fee is $340. October 16th, 2019, I'm sorry. The workshop is October 16th, 2019. Registration fee is $340. $225.33 for lodging plus meals and transportation expenses.
A motion?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Polakowski, second. Mrs. Rhodes, discussion. Roll call.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Alt?
No.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 8, 1 no.
Are we-
I'll say one.
Good sounds.
I was notified yesterday that Good Sounds is not able to provide our video services due to the large commitment they have in their own works service.
TFIM, the future is mine.
Board is asked to consider an agreement between the Consortium for Public Education and Southmoreland School District to support TFIM, The Future is Mine, at a district cost of $1,800.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Polakowski, second.
Second.
Mr. Carson, discussion.
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Halloween parade lineup.
The board is asked to grant Scottsdale Borough permission to use the Scotty Way driveway to line up October 31st, 2019 from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. for the annual Halloween parade.
Motion. Mr. Beistel, second. Mrs. Rhodes, discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
2019-2020 service delivery agreement with St. Vincent Prevention Projects.
The board is asked to consider the 2019-2020 service delivery agreement with St. Vincent's College Prevention Projects.
Motion. Mr. Carson, second. Mr. Fry, discussion.
Yeah, is that the 25,000 annual one?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Beistel? Mr. Carson? Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Alt?
No, I can believe we can deliver that here in our school system without using them, putting the money to better use. No.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 8, 1 no.
Juvenile probation officers.
The board is asked to consider approving an agreement between Southmoreland School District and Westmoreland County Juvenile Probation, which authorizes for defensive purposes probation officers to carry firearms only in district schools.
Motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second. Discussion.
Why do we have to do this every year? And I remember talking with Greg, and he said, you know, he was on board with this. It was a good idea. But is it?
We received the agreement with
Okay.
from the probation, and I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of it.
There may have been some time in the distant past when it was not agreed to.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mrs. Smith? Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Student number 1, 2019-2020 Highlands Autism.
The board is asked to consider the approval of an agreement with Southmoreland School District and Highlands Hospital Regional Center for Autism for student number 1, 2019-2020.
Motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second? Discussion?
What's the cost on that?
I believe it was $55,000.
Roll call?
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mrs. Smith? Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Student number 2, 2019-2020 Highlands Autism.
The board is asked to consider the approval of an agreement with Southmoreland School District and Highlands Hospital Regional Center for Autism for student number 2, 2019-2020.
Motion?
So be it.
Second? Mrs. Smith? Discussion?
And,
Are you,
same price?
Yes, sir.
Are you deciding on one of your options for payment?
There are 2 options.
Pay it all, number 1, up front, or make option 2, which is 3 payments of 18,700, or option 3, monthly payments? No, that's definitely not a good option.
What would be our best option to make the 3 payments?
If you pay it up front, we're already past the date. September 1st is the date, but we haven't gotten the bills yet anyway. It's $55,000 if you pay up front. That supposedly is a 2% discount from their gross tuition. So I guess you'd have to add 2% to that total to get the true number. Or you got 3 payments of 18,700, September 1st, January 1st, or May 1st, or monthly payments. If it's a 2% discount, I would say pay for it up front. The only time you'd want to consider otherwise is for cash flow purposes, so we're not in that kind of cash flow crisis, so I would say take advantage of your discount. Option 1.
That's not in the motion, so, I mean,
Yeah.
you guys can pay it however you want it, right?
The person who makes the motion in the second could agree to making that stipulation. Right, Dave?
Yes.
So those who made the motion, do you stipulate that we pay it all at once?
Mrs. Smith?
You made the motion?
We need to make a new motion?
No.
No, we consented to the amendment.
Yeah, the 3 payments ends up being $56,100 versus the $55 flat. Well, we do right now, yes. 5 years from now? Who knows? Take advantage of the discount.
Roll call?
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mrs. Smith? Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Personnel, accept resignation from supplemental PJ Spires.
The board is asked to accept the resignation of P.J. Spires as stage director effective immediately.
Motion?
So be it.
Mr. Beistel, second? Mr. Fry? Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mrs. Smith? Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Supplemental for stage director?
The board is asked to consider approval of Jacob Smithula to the supplemental as stage director for the 2019-2020 school year at a supplemental salary of $3,974.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
Comments? Is Jacob a graduate?
He is.
When did he graduate?
2 years ago.
2 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay. Not dating anybody in school?
Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Additional Quest bus drivers.
The board is asked to consider the approval of 2 new bus drivers at the request of Quest Transit, Robin Allison and Robert Allison. Clearances for each are on file with administration.
A motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Accept resignation from Jane Lehman as NJHS sponsor.
The board is asked to approve the resignation of Jane Lehman as sponsor of National Junior Honor Society effective immediately and authorize administration to post a supplemental position.
Motion.
Second? Mrs. Rhodes? Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Class play sponsor, high school musical director resignation.
The board is asked to consider the resignation of Michelle Zamborini as play sponsor and high school musical director effective immediately and grant permission to the board, from the board to post the position.
Mr. Beistel, second. Mrs. Smith? Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mrs. Smith? Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Assistant band equipment hauler volunteer.
The board is asked to approve Michael Blaze as a volunteer assistant band hauler for the 2019-2020 school year once clearances are received by the administration.
Motion?
I'll make that motion.
Mrs. Smith, second.
Second.
Mr. Fry? Discussion?
So, hey, just curious, in the meantime, you can't do anything until clearance is coming.
They're
Yes.
all in.
There.
They're in now.
Okay.
Can they run this equipment for the band haulers like we had before? You know? Because we had to go down to,
Yeah, that's what he's,
okay.
yeah. Roll call?
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 all.
Assistant band director.
The board is asked to approve Jamie Gore as assistant band director at a supplemental salary of $1,931.
Motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
Mrs. Rhodes? Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Senior class sponsor for the 2019-2020 school year.
Board is asked to consider the approval of Chris Hickson for the 2019-2020 senior class sponsor at a supplemental of $1,633.
Motion? Mr. Beistel, second. Mrs. Smith? Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Senior class sponsor for the 2019-2020 school year.
The board is asked to consider the approval of Jenna Hickson for the 2019-2020 senior class sponsor at a supplemental of $1,633.
Motion? Mr. Carson, second. Mrs. Smith, discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith? Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson? Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 all unanimous.
YEA sponsor.
The board is asked to consider the approval of Larry Ansel as the YEA sponsor Youth Education Association at the high school for the 2019-2020 school year at a supplemental salary of $1,000.
Motion?
I'll make that.
Second.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Resignation of middle school head wrestling coach.
The board is asked to accept the resignation of Ian Malice as middle school head wrestling coach and authorize administration to post the position.
Motion?
So moved.
Mr. Fry, second.
Second.
Mrs. Smith, discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
2019-2020 volunteer football coach.
The board is asked to consider the approval of Jake Beistel as a volunteer football coach for the 2019-2020 school year, and that is when he is available.
Motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
Discussion?
We have clearances.
For Jake.
I believe so, yes.
Roll call?
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Resignation of cafeteria worker.
The board is asked to accept with regrets the retirement of Kathy Perkey as a cafeteria worker effective 8/26/2019.
Motion?
So moved.
Second. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Volunteer swimming coaches.
The board is asked to consider approving Jen Basato, Mike Basato, and Barry Miller as volunteer swimming coaches for the 2019-2020 school year.
Motion?
So be it.
Second.
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah. I just thought that was funny. That's why I didn't know we had swimming.
It's a co-op partnership.
Was it Mount Pleasant?
Yes, I believe so.
Where do they swim?
Uh,
Can we swim? I didn't.
I think they use Mount Pleasant.
Yeah.
they swim with Mount Pleasant, so I would assume on their facilities.
Yeah, kids involved.
Yes, sir.
That's great. Never knew we had it. That's all.
Roll call?
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Day-to-day substitute secretary cafeteria worker.
Board is asked to approve Jessica Edwards of Everson, PA as a day-to-day secretarial cafeteria substitute on an as-need basis for the 2019-2020 school year.
Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. O?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries, 9 unanimous.
Substitute nurse?
The board is asked to consider approving Camille Tax as a day-to-day substitute nurse for the 2019-2020 school year.
Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. O?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries, 9 unanimous.
I have one other additional item. Mr. Kiefer and I were contacted today by Carrie Rath, who is a security guard. He had asked if we would please put on the agenda tonight and accept with regrets his resignation. So I would ask the board to consider the resignation of Carrie Rath with regrets. He was a security guard, effective immediately.
Motion? Second? Dis-
comment.
Public comment? Roll call?
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. O?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries, 9 unanimous.
Citizens' comments?
Hi, it's Jan Kiefer. I wish we'd have had something about the success of the football team from a purely community standpoint. You know, it's really something that I haven't seen in a number of years, and I think something should have come out of the board meeting tonight on that. I want to take a second shot at my comment that I made earlier, again, to the students. Often I speak philosophically, and it's a little bit convoluted, but just real quick, because this is my second chance. Long ago, we had buildings that needed replaced. We looked at the options. The option was to go in debt, pay interest fees, and build the buildings. And if subsequent to the buildings, then we go through this restructuring of the debt. This is the third time I've seen it go through. If we don't have people stand up back then and say, why should we pay 150% of what we should for this school just because someone else is making money off of the people, it will never end. And so to you students, I could think of 20 issues that if I was advising you that I would bring to this board next month. 20 issues that you are being unjustly being put on you, and student representatives just don't do that. They typically do what you did tonight, come with the script and tell us what's going on. Now and then they'll roll up their sleeves and they'll engage, but if you don't start at your generation and stand up for this financial burden that's being put on us, or pick another issue, an environmental issue, whatever it is, then we're in trouble, because this generation has proven that they're not going to do it. I do it. I come up here, I go anywhere, and I complain and push against the system. And I want to see students who are hellraisers, who are saying, look, there are students, the lower class of the students, the struggling students, here are their issues, here are what they don't like. I don't want to hear the students come in and say what all the great, you know, the students that color within the lines and take the test and pass the test. We know how they're doing in the school. I want to hear about the underdog and those students. And you have to bring that out of those fellow students of yours. And I'm going to coach and encourage you every meeting to be different from what I've seen here for the last 20 years. And I thank you for being here and welcome you.
I've been watching these board meetings for a long time, and one of the things that has become an absolute joke, an absolute farce, are these committee reports. We're lucky if we get one. I want to know why you continue to have these committees and no one has anything to say. Why are you doing this? Why don't you just openly admit that there's not going to be any information? We're lucky if we get one. But the most reprehensible one of them all is you have under item number 7, PSBA liaison report. That is not the committee that was established for this school district. It was called a legislative liaison report. That report is to contact the legislators in both parties, in the House, the Senate, and whoever else in Pennsylvania, and to bring back information to the board that is relevant to the entire school district, very specifically with funding. All we're getting is PSBA vomit from this communist organization, this worthless trash that's coming off the internet. I want this board to do a legislative liaison report where you are contacting legislators, finding out what's going on, finding out what's happening with our financing and the situations in our state, instead of this ridiculous situation that you have with these stupid, non-productive committee reports. I think they're a disgrace to Southmoreland.
I just have two things. So I heard, I think Mr. Carson asked how much the cost was for Highlands autism support. It was $55,000. What is transportation? Do we have a total for that? I mean, because it's not just $55,000, it's additional money as well. Mr. Marnell, do you have a number for that or no?
I do not know. I would have to ask Mr. Charlie Swink, our transportation
So
director.
if we had a guess. Okay, so we've sent somebody to Monroeville. Do you know how much that was? Clearly it shouldn't be that much. So my bottom line is we're paying $110,000 plus transportation to send 2 students to Highlands. For $110,000, we could hire another teacher in this district to be providing support for these 2 students and possibly other students. So in a district where we're cutting positions, or not, I shouldn't say cutting, we're not replacing, which ultimately to me is the same thing, we could be providing this same service better for our students. And I mean, have any of you ever toured a facility outside of this school district for autism support and witnessed what they do and the difference between here and there? Because I have, and the difference between here and there is drastic. And the difference between here and there for our children within our own community that's what we lack. Those kids that go to outside programs never get to experience their peers on a playground in town because their peers aren't from here. So I just find it sad that we're still to the tune of $110,000 plus transportation sending children out of this district. I think we should be doing more to keep our students in the district. And with that being said, we spend a lot of money on an extended school year program to send children outside of this district to programs that are less than appealing to many parents, and many parents opt to not send their children to extended school year because of that. I think we should be working now on establishing an autistic extended school year program for this coming summer. Thank you.
That's a good point there.
Very good point. Any other comments? Motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?